Most people don't actually want the truth. They want something that feels like truth. And what feels most like truth? Certainty. Clean answers, strong opinions, clear sides, a belief you can hold on to like armor. But here's the problem. Certainty isn't about what's real. It's about what's reassuring. And reassurance doesn't keep you honest. It just keeps you comfortable. That's why entire lives, entire societies have chosen certainty over truth, even when it destroyed them. We learn early that being right means being safe. As kids, we're rewarded for having answers. We get praised when we're sure. Correctness earns approval from teachers, parents, even friends. So we start to associate certainty with security. Doubt feels like failure. Changing your mind feels like weakness. And over time, it becomes easier to stick to what we know than to admit we don't know it all. Schools built during the industrial age reinforced this. Rote memorization, standardized testing, multiple choice questions where only one answer counted. It wasn't about curiosity, it was about obedience. And obedience requires certainty. Religions added another layer. Questioning doctrine was dangerous. Reciting it was safe. Even families do the same. The confident child is strong. The hesitant one is uncertain. Across history, entire systems have reinforced this lesson. Monarchies thrived on the idea that the king's word was beyond question. Military training drilled recruits to obey with absolute certainty, because hesitation could mean death. And in modern workplaces, confidence is often mistaken for competence. The manager who speaks with certainty is trusted more than the one who carefully admits doubt, even when the doubter is closer to the truth. So the association gets carved even deeper. Certainty equals authority. Uncertainty equals weakness. We weren't raised to value truth. We were raised to value confidence, even when it's empty. Certainty makes us feel strong, even when we're scared. It gives us a side to stand on, a tribe to belong to, a sense of control in a world that doesn't owe us any. It's not just belief, it becomes identity. You're not just right, you are your rightness. And protecting that belief starts to feel like protecting yourself. Psychologists call this the need for cognitive closure, the craving for definite answers, and the discomfort of ambiguity. Uncertainty feels like danger. Certainty feels like safety. Neuroscience proves it. The brain releases dopamine, the chemical of pleasure, when information confirms what we already believe. Being right literally feels rewarding, and it's not new. For early humans, shared certainty kept groups alive. Common rituals, common laws, common beliefs. These weren't luxuries, they were survival. Doubt divides tribes, certainty unites them. Even if it's wrong, your brain doesn't care if your certainty is true. It only cares if it makes you feel safe. The more we build around certainty, the harder it is to change our minds. You don't want to lose credibility, or your group, or the sense of self you've built around being the one who knows. So you stop asking questions. You avoid anything that contradicts your view. You ignore nuance, not because you're dishonest, but because you're scared. Certainty becomes a comfort zone, and the longer you stay there, the smaller your world gets. History is full of people trapped in those walls. The church silenced Galileo, not because he lacked evidence, but because admitting he was right would shatter centuries of belief. Doctors clung to bloodletting for generations, killing patients while convincing themselves they were saving them. For centuries, psychology labeled trauma as madness. Entire lives were written off because certainty demanded it. And it wasn't just ideas, it was people. The witch trials in Europe killed tens of thousands, not because evidence proved guilt, but because certainty did. Political regimes collapsed not because they lacked power, but because they clung to dogmas that reality refused to obey. Certainty doesn't keep you right, it just keeps you blind. The price of certainty is high. You stop listening, you stop learning, you stop growing, because new truth threatens old identity. And worst of all, you start mistaking agreement for connection. You only feel safe around people who believe what you believe, not because they're right, but because they mirror your need to feel stable. That's why political polarization feels so intense today. It's not just disagreement about policies, it's the tribal certainty behind them. Loyalty measured not by compassion or evidence, but by how loudly you repeat the same beliefs. Social media makes it worse. Algorithms feed you more of what you already think. Echo chambers reward certainty, while doubt gets punished as betrayal. Psychologists studying online behavior find that posts sparking outrage, the rawest form of certainty, spread far faster than measured discussion. Not because outrage is true, but because certainty is contagious. And you see the cost not just in politics or online, but in families. Parents and children cut ties because their worldviews can't coexist. Communities fracture when one side clings to absolute answers and the other dares to ask questions. Couples drift apart not because love disappears, but because certainty leaves no room for growth. That's what makes certainty so seductive and so destructive. It feels like a shield, but it slices through the very connections we need most. Here's the catch. Comfort feels like safety, but in reality, it's suffocation. Truth doesn't feel like certainty. It feels like humility, like pause, like holding two ideas in tension without rushing to collapse them. Truth often makes you uncomfortable. It pokes your ego. It slows you down when you'd rather react. It's quiet. It doesn't perform. That's why most people walk right past it. Because truth rarely feels like victory. It feels like exposure. Like standing in front of a mirror and seeing the cracks in the image you built. Socrates knew this. I know that I know nothing. He wasn't celebrating ignorance. He was admitting that truth begins when certainty ends. Buddhism teaches the same. Clinging to fixed views causes suffering. Freedom comes from letting go. Even Japan has a word for it, ma. The pause, the empty space, the acceptance that not everything must be filled with answers. Kierkegaard went further. He said, faith itself is only possible when you accept uncertainty, that meaning comes not from clinging to answers, but from stepping into the unknown. Truth isn't comforting, but it's the only thing that keeps you honest. Letting go of certainty feels like free fall, like you don't belong anywhere, like you've betrayed something you were supposed to protect. But maybe that's not a loss. Maybe that's growth, because truth doesn't care how strong your opinion is. It only asks whether you're willing to see. Science is proof. Every breakthrough, Darwin, Einstein, vaccines, space exploration, began with the courage to admit we don't know yet. Progress came not from confidence, but from humility. And on a personal level, it's the same. The biggest shifts in your life probably began when you admitted what you believed yesterday no longer fit today, walking away from a rigid ideology, leaving behind inherited certainty. It feels like betrayal at first, but it's actually the first honest step toward freedom. Truth may not make you comfortable, but it's the only thing that makes you alive. Certainty makes you feel powerful, but truth makes you real. Certainty gets you praise, but truth gives you peace. You don't need to always be right. You just need to be honest. And if you're brave enough to say, I don't know, you're already closer to truth than most people ever get. Because maybe the strongest thing you can say isn't, "I've figured it out," but "I'm still figuring it out, and I'm okay with that." That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And it might be the only kind of strength that actually lasts. Because certainty doesn't age well. What feels like strength in the moment becomes fragility when the world shifts. But truth, even when it unsettles you, ages into resilience. It's what allows you to bend without breaking, to adapt without losing yourself. And that's why certainty will always feel better, but truth will always be better. One gives you the illusion of strength, the other gives you the reality of freedom. And in the end, freedom is worth more than every comforting lie combined.